The sun had finally disappeared behind the dark desert horizon. A heavy, terrifying silence fell over the plains of Karbala. It was the eve of the 10th of Muharram. This was the deeply spiritual and utterly tragic night of Ashura. Just a few hundred yards away, 30,000 enemy soldiers sat around their blazing campfires. They laughed, ate heavily, and sharpened their cruel swords in the dark. But inside the small, fragile camp of Imam Husayn, there was no food. There was absolutely no water. The innocent children could not even cry anymore. Their dry throats were entirely sealed from the severe, burning thirst. Despite this massive physical torture, there was no fear inside the holy tents. Instead, a beautiful, vibrating sound echoed softly through the dark desert night. It was the sound of deep prayer. The 72 brave companions were reciting the Holy Quran in the dark. Historians say their quiet chanting sounded like the gentle buzzing of 1,000 bees. Late in the night, Imam Husayn called for a gathering. He asked every single warrior, friend, and family member to assemble inside the largest tent. He looked at the faces of his deeply loyal companions. These were the bravest, most honorable men on the entire face of the earth. Imam Husayn stood up to deliver his final, historical sermon. He praised God with absolute submission and pure love. Then he spoke the hardest words a divine leader could ever say. He said, "I know of no companions more loyal or better than mine. And I know of no family more righteous than my family. But the massive army of Kuffar only wants my blood. They do not care about any of you." Imam Husayn reached out and completely blew out the single candle in the tent. The entire gathering was plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. His voice echoed gently in the dark. He said, "I completely release you from your sacred oath to me. The night is dark and entirely covers you like a thick blanket. Take the hands of my family members, mount your horses, and escape into the desert. Leave me here completely alone. Save your own lives." The darkness was entirely silent for a few heavy seconds. Then a massive wave of weeping broke out in the dark tent. The candle was quickly relit by the brave companions. The fierce and deeply loyal Abbas was the very first to speak. He stepped forward, his eyes burning with absolute devotion. He loudly declared, "Why should we ever leave you? To live in a dark, empty world without you? May God completely destroy us before we ever see such a terrible day." Then an old, deeply respected warrior named Habib stood up. His white beard was completely soaked in heavy tears. He roared, "By God, if I were killed, completely burned to ashes and blown into the wind. And if I were brought back to life to be killed again. And if this happened 1,000 times. I would never ever leave your side, O grandson of the Prophet." Another brave warrior named Zuhair stepped forward and loudly agreed. One by one, every single man in the tent stood up and swore their absolute loyalty. They proudly declared that their pure blood was entirely cheap compared to the life of the Imam. Imam Husayn smiled with deep spiritual love. He raised his hands and prayed for their absolute eternal salvation. He slowly looked at them and delivered the final, undeniable truth. He said, "Tomorrow, every single one of us in this camp will be brutally killed. Not a single man will survive." They were definitely going to die. They did not panic. They did not show a single drop of fear or deep sadness. Instead, a highly shocking and beautiful thing happened. A bright, joyful smile spread across their weary faces. They knew that their martyrdom meant absolutely instant entry into paradise. They knew they would be directly greeted by the Prophet himself. They left the tent and began to happily prepare for the ultimate battle. They sat outside in the cold desert night, polishing their heavy swords. They sharpened their iron spears and tightly repaired their leather armor. They were preparing for pure death exactly like a groom prepares for his wedding day. The sheer psychological strength of these 72 men was entirely unmatched in human history. While the brave men prepared their sharp weapons, deep sorrow filled the women's tents. Imam Husayn walked slowly toward the tent of his beloved sister, Lady Zainab. As he sat down inside, he began to quietly clean his heavy sword. While polishing the steel blade, he softly recited a deeply tragic poem. The poem was about the brutal, unforgiving nature of the world. It was about the absolute certainty of approaching death. When Lady Zainab heard these heavy words, her pure heart completely shattered. She realized with absolute certainty that her brother would be brutally slaughtered tomorrow. She began to weep uncontrollably and slapped her face in deep grief. She cried, "Oh, the terrible tragedy. Today, my grandfather, my father, and my mother have all died again. You are the very last protector of our holy family." Imam Husayn quickly rushed to comfort his devastated sister. He held her gently and looked into her tear-filled eyes. He spoke with a voice full of supreme divine patience. He said, "Oh my dear sister, do not let Satan steal your absolute patience. Everything in the heavens and the earth will eventually perish except the face of God. You must show the absolute highest level of dignity." He commanded her to be fiercely strong. He told her that after he was killed, she would become the ultimate protector of the orphaned children. She would have to face the brutal tyrants in their massive palaces alone. As the dark night reached its deepest point, Imam Husayn walked out into the desert. He carefully inspected the dark land directly behind their fragile tents. He knew the massive enemy army was completely cowardly and without honor. He knew they would try to attack the women's tents directly from behind. He immediately ordered his loyal companions to dig a deep, massive trench. They dug the trench in a large half-circle exactly behind the camp. They filled the deep trench with dry desert wood, heavy branches, and thorny bushes. Imam Husayn ordered them to set it entirely on fire right before dawn. This massive wall of pure fire would fiercely protect the backs of the holy tents. It would force the massive army of 30,000 to fight the companions face to face. The dark, heavy hours of Ashura slowly passed. The deep black sky began to turn a soft, pale grey in the distance. The most tragic and bloody day in the history of the world was about to officially begin. Imam Husayn stood in the cold morning air. He called his handsome, fiercely brave 18-year-old son. His name was Ali Akbar. Ali Akbar looked and sounded exactly like his great-grandfather, the Prophet. Imam Husayn ordered his beloved son to recite the morning call to prayer. Ali Akbar stood tall and raised his clear, beautiful voice into the cold desert wind. Allahu Akbar. His deeply emotional voice echoed across the barren plains of Karbala. It reached the dark, heavily armored lines of the massive enemy army. Even some of the deeply corrupt enemy soldiers began to weep when they heard his pure voice. The brave companions of Imam Husayn lined up perfectly for their final morning prayer. They tightly strapped their heavy swords to their waists. They washed their faces with the dry dust of the earth, as there was absolutely no water left. The sun slowly rose over the massive ring of fire burning behind their tents. The 72 lions of God turned their faces entirely toward the massive ocean of enemy steel. The epic, brutal, and eternally glorious Battle of Karbala was about to finally begin.